Here we go. I do feel like our starting debt started ticking down quite early there before we actually got to look at things, but we are here now. Only one high water deposit on this map, 2 high carbons. That should actually be very usable. I'll be surprised if we don't see a scavenger this game. And plenty of other plots of resources. Everyone should pretty much get something they'll be comfortable with this game. There's plenty to utilize on this map and plenty of good locations for it too. Water is going to be one of the bigger concerns this game, I think. I expect Cubit will get the high water over in this area, and everyone else will be left to fight over the scraps. There's a medium water here, and then we've got little plots scattered about everywhere, so we'll just have to see how everyone chooses to use that. Blues is unsurprisingly going to be our first player at HQ level 2, as he did choose to found as a robot. He's gotten a decent pile of iron right under him, got a couple of mines going and a steel mill. He'll have more steel mills following that shortly. Chose to secure his aluminum first, which is understandable. That is a fairly limited resource. Soren, who I believe was our first to found, as would be expected of Soren. I think maybe a grievous error on a map with tiles like this one already up to 40,000 debt. Nonetheless, he has made it to HQ level 2. He is going to have to decide what to do with that fairly soon. We don't see too many claims scattered about for him. Also worth noting, there are geothermal vents literally all over this map. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, look at that. Look at how glowing this map is. It's ridiculous. And Gameslayer is, in fact, he's gone for a bit of a power robot play. He hasn't followed it out like he usually does. I'm kind of curious if he simply didn't have the silicon to use initially, if he couldn't quite get enough on the found to get both panels up, or if he just decided, well, maybe one panel is enough for now. That way he has access to this aluminum and this silicon throughout the night, maybe can push to HQ level 2 a bit more effectively. He does have it available now. I would expect to see another solar panel join this one momentarily, and we'll have to see what else he does from there. Meanwhile, Cubit has gotten up to HQ level 2 himself. He has taken the high water as expected, interestingly enough, also going for the low adjacent to it. That's pretty aggressive on the amount of water that he's collecting per second right now, 4.5. That is a lot to sell off. That said, he's also, it seems, managed to push to a geotherm, which is another thing I would actually be tempted to question. Carbon is pretty cheap right now. He probably has a bit more of it than he actually needs with the high and a medium tile together. But that geotherm, it did cost him a goon squad to protect, so it cost its base price, cheap enough as that is, and then it cost an additional goon squad on top of that, at least $2,000 spent for that. So that was an expensive tile to take this early in the game. That said, Cubit is still in a position where he's managed to set up a couple of farms, and he should be able to use those to make the money he needs to get to HQ level 3. Now, Blues, up in our corner, was the first one to push to 3. No big surprise there, going into a solar panel himself, in addition to just a whole ton of steel. Pretty much exactly, in a lot of ways, what we would expect to see out of a robotic player. He's also, interestingly enough, going to be the one to secure the medium water. That really shouldn't be too much of a surprise, I suppose. 2 robots on this map that's light on water is probably a decent idea out of these players. And of course, Soren, he doesn't really care about how big the water is. He just wants to make sure he has it in general. Everybody managed to push to HQ level 3 at this point. Not too far behind Blues, who does have that distinct lead in upgrades right now. Gameslayer going to be moving into his fairly classic glass furnaces. Everybody should realistically know who everybody else is by now. It's been pretty clear by the playstyles and exactly how Black Market has been distributed and such. Everybody really respecting each other so far. No real attacks going out. People not wanting to draw attention to themselves by maybe hitting a goon squad and getting in trouble. I'd be a little surprised to see this aluminum go for less than like 8,000. But it's hard to say exactly how high it could get. Obviously, a high aluminum tile basically turns into just a solar panel late in the game. But the tile is of questionable value, certainly. I am a bit surprised to see Soren pushing for it so hard. He already has this aluminum tile way separated from his base. I wouldn't want to spend the fuel cost on this additional one, on top of having 12,000 extra debt when you're already in debt trouble. I mean, that's just Soren being like, hey guys, I'm Soren. Don't know if you noticed. I want to make absolutely certain you got that. I'm the guy, and twice as much debt as everybody else combined. Just so you know. Good job, Soren. It's nice that you're letting everybody else have all that information. One interesting thing to note about this game is that Blues actually has almost complete control of the iron market. I think he might be the only one collecting it, as we've only got 2 people actually generating steel consistently this game. Gameslayer has a little bit to himself as well. But he's not got the iron collection going to it. He's only got the 2 steel mills. He's not committed to the idea. That's basically my point. Whoa! That was 2 power surges coming down immediately. Both players just targeting each other. Interestingly enough, Gameslayer is going to hit both farms that he was aiming for. Unfortunately, the third had not begun construction yet, so it's not frozen out. Whereas Cubit, all he gets for his trouble is a single silicon quarry. Now, that silicon quarry is quite valuable with the solar panels right next to it. Collecting a lot of silicon per second, quite frankly. 2.62 is enough to make that tile quite profitable, but it's not really what he was looking for out of that power surge, unfortunately. Blues once again maintaining lead in the upgrades, whereas Soren, he's taken a bit of a detour. He wants teleportation, pretty much forced it onto himself by taking these extra tiles, and he has decided, I want a solar panel here rather than having to collect resources. He just wants that extra power income. On the other hand, all it's really doing right now is paying down the debt that he acquired so that he could put down the power, so nothing really interesting coming from that tile just yet. Steel shortage is going to make things a little bit awkward. Cubit actually bought into that quite heavily. One has to assume that he was paying attention as a scavenger, noticed it coming quickly, and made a little bit of profit out of everybody else. The other player's probably not going to be too happy to see that. It is going to make it a little bit harder for them to upgrade. However, if they choose to take a detour, like Soren has, it could actually be quite beneficial for now. Having all that extra cash from steel could allow him to far more easily utilize his patent lab. And Blues should actually be, like, over the moon that shortage occurred. It gives him access to so much money, so he can use his own patent lab, and he can defend himself more easily in case somebody got aggressive against him for his current apparent lead. Only 6,000 for that geotherm. I mean, that actually surprises me a bit. I know geotherms are plentiful on this map, but Soren was willing to pay 12,000 for a significantly weaker tile, realistically. He's just using it for power. It's got half the power generation, effectively, basically, of a geotherm. And this one went for half price of the power tile. I have to actually question that. It feels inconsistent to me that would turn out that way. Even with steel as expensive as it is now, it's not always going to be that way. You will find the opportunity to mix that in. Thinking Machines just finished up for Blues. He is starting carbon scrubbing immediately afterward, making sure to use those adrenaline boosts to his advantage. Soren, on the other hand, he has stopped with the patent lab for now. He's not making any use of it at the moment, even though he is selling down steel. I'm unsure. Okay, virtual reality is what he wants to try and pick up next. So just some missteps coming in from Soren. He's just being a little bit lackadaisical about maintaining that. Blues, meanwhile, he's just sailing ahead of everybody. He's like, man, steel's good. I'll just make steel. Food's okay. I'll make food. That's cool. Hasn't quite gotten any cash out of his power, but he is staying out of debt quite nicely with it. And I would say Blues has a bit of a commanding lead at this point. This patent lab getting so much work done through its adrenaline boost. It was defended quite nicely through all that. He even catches a mutiny with it. And he can just keep on going, sailing on through with it. Hard to say exactly what he'll go after. Virtual reality no longer an option. Is Soren going to keep using that? Not at the moment. It's going to lie dormant for now. He actually chose to upgrade instead of continuing to use that. Gameslayer, meanwhile, he's trying to take advantage of these patent labs being down early, as is Cubit. Both of them with chemical production online. Definitely a strong move against 2 players who have thrown down patent labs. You just kind of make sure to make that money back yourself. On top of that, once you've thrown down the chem labs and you've frozen your opponent's chem labs, I expect to see a player like Cubit, especially having been doing this, you buy up those chemicals. You make it expensive to use those labs. And then you just sit on them and sit on them and sit on them and sit on them until you have the money you want to go and kill the patent lab player. And with that, we do see that Soren has, in fact, fallen out of the game. He could not hold on quite well enough to continue using that patent lab against Cubit and Gameslayer's assault. Just using Soren basically feeding them money along with blues that entire time and leaving himself quite vulnerable in the process. I believe he had only purchased up one extra of his own stock. Made it very, very difficult for him to defend himself. New claim. I'll be a bit surprised if this goes for less than 16,000, to be honest. I could easily see that happening here. Man, all that steel money is going to be pretty good. Now, it's not actually worth all that much, realistically, as a subsidiary. He's only HQ level 4. He doesn't have anything particularly interesting, except for virtual reality, which, of course, the colony is going to be using to the best of its ability. But still, it's always nice to have one less opponent in the game, and everybody decided to dive on in and eliminate him the moment Cubit got that ball rolling. So, very, very good to see indeed. Now, Blues is still in a strong position here. There can be no doubt about that. He's still HQ level 5. He still has plenty of patents for himself. Carbon scrubbing, thinking machines, perpetual motion, and superconductor. So debt should not be a problem for him long term. It looks like he has moved away from that patent lab. Hasn't decided what he actually wants to do with that tile just yet. Probably will be committing to an Offworld eventually, but for the moment he doesn't want to commit those resources. Gameslayer has decided, I'm still HQ level 4. I have some cash on hand. I would like to get aggressive with it, but I feel it's not going to work out. Don't let Cubit get me, says Cubit. Maybe we should just institute a no-talking rule. Nah, that would be silly. We don't need to do that. Gameslayer looked like he was trying to motivate Blues to help him kill off the scavenger, maybe a bit scared of those black market effects, but it wasn't going to work out, so he sells out, goes ahead and takes his upgrade. And I believe at this point he will be running a fair ways behind everybody else. This Pleasure Dome doing almost nothing without virtual reality and with 2 robots on the map. It's not a particularly good Pleasure Dome, especially considering the Soren subsidiary has his own. So I'm a bit concerned. These two are going to have to figure out something to do against Blues, who has just decided he wants to make steel. That's all he's interested in right now, upgrading his steel production with this tech lab, which has been getting quite a lot of work done for him already.
The black market is online.
That's going to be quite nice for him. Those adrenaline boosts clearly have paid out a little bit, although I think he's only used the 1. This is very surprising to me, actually. A game with Cubit as a scavenger in it, and adrenaline boosts are still sitting back at only $3,000 a piece. Also, these chem labs, this is very unfortunate for Cubit. He's trying to make fuel, and then he's burning it all up in these chem labs. That is not the kind of thing you want to see. Gameslayer has finally managed to transition out of his own. A network virus right here could actually just be devastating. But Cubit's going to spot things in time and get them cleared out. And Blues is choosing to just secure his lead. He just knows that one of the primary ways he could be knocked out is if he's ganged up on. So he's trying to make sure that can't happen by making sure he's got the half of his stock he requires to maintain control of his company until someone buys him out completely. Certainly not a bad move. Mutiny. On to the carbon quarry. Alright, well that is going to be painful for Cubit. Gameslayer upset about the fact that Soren was the one knocked out. He wanted to see Blues fall instead. But not much to do about that at this point. All way too late. Now, it is perhaps true that Soren was not as much of a concern about Blues. That's what we were discussing the entire time. And he had fallen into a bit of a difficult position. It is going to be frightening to have to deal with Blues, who has now managed to secure an off-world market, which is boosted but not launching right now. $720 value for oxygen off-world. So with the boost, that's only going to take, well, not very long to send. I believe it's supposed to be something in the realm of 40 seconds per launch through adrenaline boosts. So he is going to be sitting on an awful lot of cash very, very soon here. And frankly, he has his pick of who he would like to kill at this point. I mean, Cubit is not sitting on a particularly large amount of money. Although, having just committed to that off-world market, he's maybe opened himself up to a bit of a vulnerability. He's going to have to defend himself very, very quickly after this, I think. And hope to force Asimov to targeting Gameslayer. Hope that Blues will go after Gameslayer. That's a good freeze. That's a solid freeze, no doubt. Cubit and Blues both attacking each other once again, it looks like. Interesting way that that freeze went. Not exactly what Blues would have been looking for. So Cubit has defended himself quite effectively at this point. It's exactly the kind of thing you need to see out of him. And these wind turbines should actually be doing pretty good work paying off his debt, which is going to be important in the near future. Whereas Gameslayer, he's the only one left vulnerable. He also has an off-world market going up. He's building solar panels into this dust storm, hoping that it fades away soon, I suppose. Bit of a questionable decision, especially with silicon as expensive as it is, but he needed power somewhere. So what are you going to do? I would like to say that the ball is firmly in Blue's court at this point. He can approach the game however he wants to. And it looks like he's just going to take the most defensive route he possibly can. He just keeps buying up his own stock. I would be very tempted if I were him to try and force the situation, but that would be a questionable decision. You knock out Gameslayer with Cubit, and you're kind of left one-on-one against a guy who has a lot of extra stock and a lot of a subsidiary who's just paying cash after cash after cash over to him. You can see that Blues himself is not getting a whole lot of money out of Soren, whereas Cubit, he's going to be getting, I believe, 5 times that amount. So 15,000. Nobody getting a ridiculous amount of cash. Soren not having great production as it stands, only being level 4, but still worth noting, especially for that stock advantage that it's affording Cubit right now. You can see their stock prices are very similar, despite how much more Asimov/Blues has bought into himself. Alright. Clark now sitting on all the extra cash because Blues has been playing so defensively. It looks like all of our players are actually going to focus on defending themselves rather than getting aggressive. So Gameslayer, he's managed to stay alive in this game simply because his opponents are both too scared of each other to make the first move. And Blues is actually going to be the first of these 3 players to get aggressive against the other in this late stage of the game. Managed to secure just 1 of Cubit's stock. Not near enough to really get anything done in the near future, but certainly a nice edge potentially moving into the later portion of the game. Let's go ahead and look at where we're at in terms of tech. Gameslayer sitting on a lot of electronics production. Actually, you know what? We'll do this the easier way. Yeah, stock is being purchased. We'll get back to that in just a moment. Show me technology. So Blue's sitting on only 5 total techs. He hasn't really moved up a whole lot since we last looked at him, despite the fact that he does have that engineering lab working away. Cubit is sitting on 2. Not a whole lot getting done there, just water and food. Wants to focus on those off-world centered life support areas. An interesting decision considering not a whole lot of that being consumed this game. And then Gameslayer, he's been focusing mostly on electronics with a little power and oxygen to go along with them. Certainly an understandable decision. One has to assume Superconductor has been doing great work for Blues this game, keeping his debt pretty low, while Cubits and Gameslayers have gotten not out of control, but certainly have grown significantly. The question is, how do you play out the game from here? Cubit does have 2 off-world markets down, which certainly could be the edge he needs to actually finish this game if he can keep a hold of them through these mutinies he's being bombarded with. Those should come to an end fairly soon. $50,000 mutiny is not looking nearly as attractive as it was back at 10 and 20,000. Water has gotten ridiculously out of control. I think it's so important that Cubit managed to get a hold of these. I mean, look at how vulnerable this could be to even pirates right now. Could be fairly ridiculous. I have to wonder, Cubit's not even holding on to any of it. That's just the pure water price right now. All these off-worlds having gone up, just serving to drive that price higher and higher and higher. And suddenly, Cubit's life support could actually cause him a bit of trouble with the sheer amount of debt it could be giving him. He's forced into these negative situations almost just to hold on to the game, but it's burning his money rather than doing anything positive for him. Just while it maintains that ridiculously high water price. And you can see he doesn't actually have water coming in almost. There you go. Now he finally does. I believe that was another water upgrade. Finally working in his favor, but he's consuming so much of it. It's like he's just got a bunch of dead tiles sitting around burning money. You have to wonder if Cubit's just so focused on other things, trying to figure out what he can do around this map to stay in the game, whereas Gameslayer, he's also managed to push to 2 off-worlds just off in his corner and has both of them boosted, making a ridiculous amount of money per second. You can see that fuel price is so low that those launches are actually going to work out quite well for him, splitting between fuel and oxygen. One concern I do have for Gameslayer is I don't believe he has access to any water whatsoever this game. He is relying purely on his oxygen tech in order to keep his reactors money efficient, which isn't really a place you want to be, but it could be a lot worse. One nice thing about it is that it's keeping that fuel price low and allowing him to make chemicals as well. Certainly not a bad thing to see. You can see everybody else's reactors are kind of flagging a bit. Certainly having an awful lot of trouble keeping up with everything. This is still a solar panel, Soren. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. This is still a solar panel. You have teleportation. I know you're an AI, but come on. Come on. All right. Back to the game at hand. You can see that Cubit and Blues have both pretty much committed to going after each other, and that does leave Gameslayer, I think, in the favored position to take this game. While all this has been happening, he was the one who took the extreme risks. Cubit and Blues could have together taken him down when he was trying to push the Offworld market, and he had 2 upgrade labs down. Instead, they left the player who was committing the most to the late game by the wayside, and now he's developed so much money he could be a threat to either, or both, potentially. Not looking to be in a fantastic spot right now. As you can see, Cubit could actually... Oh, and he is actually killed off by Gameslayer. That's going to leave Blues in, once again, actually a pretty strong position. I don't know if that was the correct decision out of Gameslayer. Might have been a bit too concerned about exactly how things were going to play out. Might have wanted the extra stock. But unfortunately, he's left in a position where he is once again behind on cash and behind in stock and behind in stock price. The primary advantage he's now sitting on is going to, in fact, be his upgrade labs, having significantly more tech than Blues's do. Gameslayer sitting on 12 techs, 3 of them oxygen production, 3 chem, 3 carbon, and 3 electronics, along with 1 power, to Blues 9. Blues has very, very strong production, 3 of it water, and 3 of it, in fact, oxygen. Oh wow, this is a concern. All these are turned off, despite the fact that they would actually be profitable, because that oxygen price is just so high. And Blues, he does only have the 2 water tiles, certainly making an awful lot of money, but easily targetable by something like pirates, which we should be seeing plenty of black market coming out at this late stage of the game. Basically should be getting used on cooldown. Oh, but I think Superconductor may actually tell the tale this time. As you can see, Blues, one of his serious advantages is coming from the fact that, as discussed earlier, he doesn't have any debt now. He's paid it all off. It's gone completely. Whereas Gameslayer, he's just been letting it accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. Now he has a lot of power online, but power's down at $10 a piece. Who cares? You know what I mean? He's flagging, he's running too far behind. I don't see what he can do to actually recover from this position. $168,000 of debt, I think, may have been the nail in his coffin compared to Blues sitting on none. Blues actually has the cash he needs at this point to finish off the game. If he sees it, he just needs to, he'll probably let this launch finish. He should cancel immediately afterward. That red button will appear, and Blues will, in fact, take the game at that point. We are just waiting for him to make the cancels that he needs in order to take that decisive blow, and there it is. There you are. Whew. So Blues, with the early lead, does manage to take it. Gameslayer says poor Pleasure Dome. Yeah, that was certainly a bit of an unfortunate tile claim for him. I imagine it was actually losing him quite a lot of debt. Not actually losing him cash, but costing quite a lot of debt in exchange for having that Pleasure Dome up. I believe subs do provide population. Did Blues buy me earlier? Well, I mean, Gameslayer bought you earlier. Might have been a misstep on Gameslayer's part not to just sit back. Maybe even a possibility for a Gameslayer, I believe in this version, that he does have available to him would be, I believe he can pay all the cash to buy back his own stock. I believe that's still a thing he can do. Give that money over to Blues, encourage Blues to kill Cubit, and then Gameslayer sitting on enough cash afterward to be the aggressor quickly before that subsidiary difference kills him off. It would have been a gamble, but clearly a gamble is what he needed, as playing the game out straight didn't end up resulting in his loss. Cupid and Gameslayer just discussing what we were talking about. Talking about how maybe that was the move that killed them both off. He does have a point. But eventually somebody's got to make the move. And this is what I'm talking about. Cubit, I think Cubit and Blues could have potentially killed off Gameslayer earlier, not let him kind of have a say in how that game was going to be finished. And Cubit is going to be the one who ends up paying the price for that. Gameslayer bought so many resources that game. I imagine just to keep those Offworlds running. Look how much money was made Offworld this game. It was very expensive to launch as well, so that's not like straight profits. But it is something to pay attention to. But Blues, you can see just how much more successful he was at making money this game in terms of net revenue than everybody else. He certainly did a strong job this time, and it was a well-deserved win. So Blues is going to lead this series 1-0 as we move into game number 2. Not too much more to look at, I don't think. Cubit, you can tell. Considering that Cubit died before the end of the game, he bought 21 black market items this game. That is so many. 4 claims, 4 mutinies, 1 network virus, 7 power surges, filthy pirates, no adrenaline no, 2 adrenaline boosts. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at it correctly. That's a bit more reasonable. I expect those adrenaline boosts to be heavily abused by these players the best that they can. So that is, in fact, good to see. Soren falling out early, only purchased 2 black market items, a new claim, and a goon squad. Gameslayer was reasonably aggressive once the off-world markets came down, but before that, actually a bit passive for the most part, just with that early power surge. Alright, well, let's get on out of here and head on into game number 2.